Assalamu alaikum class. Let's just start with the chapter 7. Economic growth का है. We are following the David Whale book और उसको हम लोग chapter by chapter कर रहे हैं. We already did chapter 6. Now we are up to chapter 7. That is measuring productivity. Approximate determinant of long run growth. That is productivity. So let's come up with the content, what we already have studied and what we are going to study now. Initially, if we talk about the introduction, then what are the proximate determinants? Physical capital, population growth, human capital. We already did physical capital in detail, population growth as well, and human capital in last lecture. Under human capital, we covered health and education as sub-determinants. Then we are now going to do the productivity. प्रोडक्टिविटी में हम दो चीज़ों को कवर करेंगे, दैट इज़ टेक्नोलॉजी एंड एफिशिएंसी, एंड नेक्स्ट विल बी द इंटरनेशनल ट्रेड. सो लेट्स जस्ट टॉक अबाउट द प्रोडक्टिविटी. सो इससे पहले कुछ बेसिक इसकी हम लोग नोट्स ले लेंगे और वी आर गोइंग टू टॉक अबाउट द बेसिक्स कि प्रोडक्टिविटी होती क्या है, हम इसको किस तरह डिफ्रेंशिएट करेंगे, इसको हाउ वी आर गोइंग टू रिलेट इट विद द टोटल फैक्टर प्रोडक्टिविटी एंड लेबर प्रोडक्टिविटी, इसको हम डिफ्रेंशिएट कैसे करेंगे. तो लेट्स जस्ट टॉक अबाउट दैट. सबसे पहले यू नीड टू नो व्हाट प्रोडक्टिविटी इज़. तो किसी भी फैक्टर ऑफ प्रोडक्शन की जो अफेक्टिवनेस होती है टू कन्वर्ट इट टू एन आउटपुट, हम जब भी कोई आउटपुट क्रिएट करते हैं फ्रॉम एन इनपुट, तो उसकी जो अफेक्टिवनेस होती है दैट इज़ बेसिकली द productivity. So we saw how factor accumulation can explain income level differences, मगर हमने दो चीज़ों को एक्सप्लेन नहीं किया कि सारे डिफरेंसेस मेजर नहीं कर सकते हम, एंड सेकेंडली कोई भी इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ लॉन्ग रन में दैट इज़ द सस्टेन्ड हम लोगों के पास जो ग्रोथ होती है उसको अभी तक एक्सप्लेन नहीं किया. व्हाट कम्स नेक्स्ट, दैट इज़ we will see that long run economic growth is due to growth in productivity. अब कौन सी होती है, again we are going to talk about two things, that is long run productivity growth is due to mainly to टेक्नोलॉजिकल प्रोग्रेस और दूसरा क्या है, एफिशिएंसी. जब कंट्रीज डिफर करती हैं ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ एफिशिएंसी तो उनकी प्रोडक्टिविटी किस तरह अफेक्ट होती है. सो लेट्स जस्ट टॉक अबाउट फ्यू टर्मिनोलॉजीज लाइक आई मेंशन बिफोर कि लेबर प्रोडक्टिविटी और टोटल फैक्टर प्रोडक्टिविटी को हम इसके अंदर इनकाउंटर करेंगे. बट व्हाट इज़ लेबर प्रोडक्टिविटी, दैट इज़ द आउटपुट पर वर्कर, और ये किस पे डिपेंड करती है, टेक्नोलॉजी कैपिटल एंड एफिशिएंसी पे. एंड व्हाट इज़ टोटल फैक्टर प्रोडक्टिविटी, तो बेसिकली ये एक एबिलिटी है टू with which all factors are combined to produce outputs, and it does not depend upon the capital, और इसको हम मल्टी फैक्टर प्रोडक्टिविटी भी कहते हैं. नेक्स्ट, इसको जो हमारी प्रोडक्टिविटी का जो हम लोग कर रहे हैं, हाउ वी मेजर प्रोडक्टिविटी, दैट इज़ बेसिकली द टोटल फैक्टर प्रोडक्टिविटी, कि हम उसकी एबिलिटी मेजर करेंगे या इफेक्टिवनेस मेजर करेंगे किसी भी इनपुट को चेंज करने के लिए इनटू एन आउटपुट. So what is productivity? Specifically total factor productivity. It is the effectiveness or ability to with which production factors are used to produce outputs, and it's determined by, again I'm repeating, that is technology and efficiency. Now what is technology? It's the knowledge about how to combine inputs in order to produce outputs, like you know before. And what is efficiency? It's the difference in productivity that are not explained by differences in technology. How efficient you are, that doesn't depend upon the technology, and that has not been explained by the technology basically. So efficiency is something that differentiate one country or one sector from the other. So we are going to exemplify them but later on. अभी हम इसको डिटेल में देखते हैं कि हम प्रोडक्टिविटी को मेजर कैसे करेंगे. So इस चैप्टर में हम लोगों ने कवर क्या करनी है बातें, दैट इज़ what is productivity, how to measure it, and what are the differences between countries on the basis of productivity. और हमारे जो इसकी बेसिस पे, प्रोडक्टिविटी की बेसिस पे फिर हमारे जो इनकम लेवल में डिफरेंसेस आते हैं बिटवीन कंट्रीज, उसको मेजर करना या उसको देखेंगे. वी आर गोइंग टू टॉक अबाउट दैट. एंड द नेक्स्ट इज कि अगर आपके इनकम डिफरेंसेस हैं तो उससे फिर आपकी ग्रोथ पे क्या इम्पैक्ट आता है, वी आर गोइंग टू डिस्कस दैट थिंग एज वेल। एंड द नेक्स्ट जो लास्ट इसका हमारा सब टॉपिक है दैट इज ये रिलेटिव कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशंस ऑफ प्रोडक्टिविटी ग्रोथ एंड फैक्ट्री accumulation इन कंट्रीज total growth. So let's just talk about the theoretical framework. It's the figure 7.1 in your book. That is page 201. Just mark it down. You can see. आप इसको tally करें book के साथ. It's page 201. I'm repeating. So it says it's basically explaining the uh, output per worker differences. थ्री पॉसिबल इसकी सोर्सेज, मतलब हम इसको तीन कैटेगरीज में सब डिवाइड करेंगे एंड वी आर गोइंग टू एक्सप्लेन इट अंडर थ्री सब ऑप्शंस। पहला हम जो इसको करते हैं डिफरेंस किस बेसिस पे देखते हैं, दैट इज डिफरेंसेस इन आउटपुट ड्यू टू फैक्टर एक्यूमुलेशन। सेकंड क्या है, डिफरेंसेस इन आउटपुट ड्यू टू प्रोडक्टिविटी। और थर्ड मतलब अगर हम फैक्ट्री एक्यूमुलेशन को ले रहे हैं ऑन दैट स्पॉट वी आर कंसिडरिंग प्रोडक्टिविटी एज कांस्टेंट, एंड व्हेन वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट द डिफरेंसेस इन आउटपुट ड्यू टू प्रोडक्टिविटी हियर वी आर टेकिंग फैक्ट्री एक्यूमुलेशन एज कांस्टेंट फैक्टर। और थर्ड है डिफरेंसेस इन आउटपुट ड्यू टू द बोथ प्रोडक्टिविटी एंड फैक्ट्री एक्यूमुलेशन, यहाँ पे हम दोनों को वेरी कर रहे हैं। सो व्हेन वी टॉक अबाउट द फैक्ट्री एक्यूमुलेशन तो उसमें हम लोगों का जो प्रोडक्शन फंक्शन है दैट इज गोइंग टू बी वन ओनली। सो यू कैन सी हेयर्स कंट्री 2 एंड हेयर्स कंट्री 1, तो हमने उसको एक्स एक्सिस वाई एक्सिस पे एक्स एक्सिस पे वी आर मेंशनिंग द फैक्टर ऑफ प्रोडक्शन पर वर्कर एंड फॉर द वाई एक्सिस वी आर टेकिंग द आउटपुट पर वर्कर। तो इनपुट आउटपुट बेसिकली इस चीज़ को यहाँ पे हाईलाइट किया हुआ है। तो फैक्ट्री एक्यूमुलेशन में एज वी आर टेकिंग प्रोडक्टिविटी कांस्टेंट सो वी आर गोइंग to make just one production function for both countries, and here is the production function, a curvy one, उस पे आप देख लें। For country 2 it makes the y2 output, and for the country 1 it makes it's on the upper hand, that is y1 output per worker. When it comes about the differences in output due to productivity, now here the factory accumulation is same. What is factory accumulation? Basically it's the increase in quantity of your inputs जो भी आपके हैं, whether it's human capital or physical capital. तो यहाँ पे बात करते हैं इनके डिफरेंसेस की। दैट मीन्स इफ द प्रोडक्टिविटी इज डिफरेंट दैट मीन्स आपके दो सेपरेट प्रोडक्शन फंक्शंस बनेंगे। एक कंट्री की प्रोडक्टिविटी दूसरी कंट्री की प्रोडक्टिविटी से डिफरेंट है, दैट मीन्स वो दो डिफरेंट प्रोडक्शन फंक्शंस पे काम कर रहे हैं। एक का प्रोडक्शन पैटर्न जो है दैट इज डिफरेंट फ्रॉम द अदर वन, सो वी आर गोइंग टू टेक two production functions here. The upper one is for the country 1 and the lower production function is for country 2, and we are going to, as the factor accumulation is same for both countries, so they are going to be on the factor of production per worker on the same point on the x-axis, but for the y-axis they are again going to be on the two separate points, that is y2 and y1. And when we talk about the third possible source of differences in output per worker, here both things are different from each other. First is productivity, second is factory accumulation. So we are going to make two separate production functions, plus the factors of production per worker would be different for both countries. So for country 2, here we make y2 on the first production function, that is below the that is the first one that lies below the production function of country 1, and for country 1 it lies above here in the one I'm mentioning with the um, that arrow, and it shows the output for country 1. So these are three possible sources of differentiating your output per worker via theoretical framework. So what comes here when we talk about it, there arise a problem with observation, that is inferring productivity from data on output and factor accumulation. So iski bhi again we are going to talk about three different stages, three different cases. First is the countries have equal factor accumulation but country one has higher output. फैक्टर एक्यूमुलेशन दोनों की सेम है जी, लेकिन उनके आउटपुट में डिफरेंस है. सो हाउ वी आर गोइंग टू ग्राफ देम, so here it is mentioned you are going to make them aligned on one vertical line but with different outputs. And when the countries have equal output but country 1 has higher factor accumulation, आउटपुट सेम है, सी दे आर हॉरिजॉन्टली ऑन द सेम स्पॉट, लेकिन अगर हम फैक्टर ऑफ प्रोडक्शन पर वर्कर देखें तो दे आर डिफरेंट फॉर ईच कंट्री. And when we talk about the country one has higher output and higher factor accumulation, so it lies above country two by all the means, whether it's about horizontal axis or a vertical axis, it's lying above the country two. Next, if we talk about the accounting part, that is, अगर हम real statistics की बात करें, तो here we are taking the consistent data from year 1975 to 2009 for 90 countries, और उसकी जो variables को measure किया है, that is your physical capital, human capital, output per worker, that is your y, and factors of production. उसको k with h is given, k is with the power, k small is your physical capital per worker, that is 1 by 3, alpha here is 1 by 3, and what is your human capital per worker, that is small h, mentioned as small h, and it's with the power 1 minus alpha, that is 2 by 3. And what's your productivity? Productivity is basically mentioned in terms of a, that is the technology, as we have already studied in the Cobb Douglas production function. So it's mentioned over here, it is in terms of productivity now, so it's also mentioned over here. अगर देखा जाए तो कंट्री वाइज अगर हम इसको करें, differences को measure करें world wide, so US is on the top by the output per worker, that is 1 again, physical capital per worker is 1 again, human capital per worker 1, factor of production 1, and productivity, that is 1. So as we go down, Malawi is the country that is with the lowest output per worker, physical capital per worker, human capital per worker, factors of production, and the productivity. So that ultimately means कि अगर आपकी physical capital, human capital और productivity कम है, तो that ultimately affects your output per worker, और वो भी कम ही होगा. So what is the total factor productivity differences across the world? हमने ऊपर जो बातें की हैं detailed, we are going to discuss them. So lower income in Canada compared to USA is mainly due to the lower productivity. And what about the South Korea? It had the same quantity of factors. Its income would be 64% that of the USA. And what about Canada and UK comparative study? It shows the similar income levels, but Canada has more factors. The UK is thus more productive. So this case study is the Heston, Summers and Etten 2011. इनकी output per worker की है study है, and they have calculated the real values for human capital, physical capital, and that's been used in your section 7.3. It's already mentioned here, it's on page number 203. So what comes next, that is how can we explain the income differences. So what is more important to explain income differences? Either it's capital accumulation or your productivity. So let's just talk about that. We are going to take a few more graphs about this. That is, it's on page number 209, that is figure 7.3. We are going to talk about the role of factor of production in determining output per worker, and it is relative to US. So ये जो स्टडी है दैट इज़ बेसिकली डिपेंडेंट, हमारे पास जो ऑलरेडी 90 कंट्रीज़ का डेटा था, वी जस्ट टुक दैट डेटा एंड डिवाइडेड ऑल दोज countries into 5 main groups. हमने परसेंटाइल के अकॉर्डिंग 20%, 20%, 20% के अकॉर्डिंग हमने उनको नेम दे दिया, पोरेस्ट टू द रिचेस्ट. पोरेस्ट इज़ द कंट्री, उसमें हम लोगों ने वो कंट्रीज़ का ग्रुप डाल दिया, इट्स द ग्रुप ऑफ कंट्रीज जिसमें पोरेस्ट कंट्रीज लाई करेंगी. देन सेकंड कम्स द सेकंड पोरेस्ट, मींस इट्स लिटिल अबव देन द पोरेस्ट स्टेट, मगर ये मिडिल से थोड़ा बिलो है. एंड देन कम्स द 20% ऑफ द मिडिल कंट्रीज that lies below the second richest countries but above the second poorest countries. And then is the second richest, उसका हमने 20% लिया है, इसमें वो countries हैं जो कि developed हैं, but they are not the richest one, they are the second richest. And then lies the चार्ट, या फिर हम कहेंगे वो डेटा सेट है जिसमें हम लोगों के पास 20% ऑफ द रिचेस्ट कंट्रीज, और इसकी इन सारी कंट्रीज का कंपैरेटिव जो हम लोगों ने रिलेटिव स्टडी की है, दैट इज with the US. So what it states, that is the richest quintile has 94% of the US level on average. If we compare that with the US, तो जो richest countries का 20% है उसका जो that is equivalence with the US upon 94%. If productivities were the same, richest quintiles per capita income would be 94% that of the USA. So if we talk about the comparative study, अगर इसको और यूएसए को सेम प्रोडक्टिविटीज, इनकी सेम प्रोडक्टिविटीज हों, तो उनका जो इनकम पर कैपिटा क्या होगी, दैट विल बी ऑलमोस्ट 94% इक्वल टू द US income, per capita income. And if we talk about the poorest countries, अगर उनका comparison किया जाए with USA, we are just skipping the middle three groups. So let's just talk about the poorest one. So the lowest quintile has 19%. So if productivities were the same, poorest quintiles per capita income would be 19% that of the USA. And next comes it's figure 7.4. It's on page 210. That is the role of productivity in determining output per worker. And it's showing the productivity that is relative to US. Again, it's a comparative study with US. पहला हम लोगों ने factory accumulation को किया है, and now comes productivity. So let's just talk about this. Again, if the richest quintile has 94% of the US level on average, that means if factor accumulation were the same, अगर हम factor accumulation को constant कर दें, so productivity की basis पे अगर हम comparative study करें USA के साथ, richest जो हमारा group है 20% का, so what it states, richest quintiles per capita income would be 94% that of the US. Again, it's same, almost same. अगर हमारा whether it's factor accumulation or productivity, if we keep any of them constant, तो उसका जो comparative analysis होगा with USA, that is 94%. And for the lowest quintile is 15%. If factor accumulation were the same, poorest quintiles per capita income would be 15% that of the USA. Now let's talk about what it says. It's the similar, note how similar the numbers are per group between both productivity and factor accumulation. What now what about the middle income countries? Let's just talk about their income differences. So a typical mid income country, उसका जो comparative study है with USA, that is factor accumulation के साथ 51% with respect to USA. अगर total factor of productivity देखा जाए तो that is again 41% with respect to USA. And collectively इनकी अगर income का comparison किया जाए है per capita income, तो that will be 21% of the US income. That is slight more than the poorest group, and lowest than the far more lower than the richest group. For mid-income countries, factor accumulation and productivity both play important roles in explaining why they are poorer. Both figures yield a similar picture. Both factor accumulation and total factor productivity increases at similar rates when going from poorest to the richest countries. हम लोगों ने दो separate graphs देखे, that is figure 7.3 and 7.4. तो उसमें जो increasing trend है comparative to US, वो almost similar है. And more sophisticated analysis suggests that 47% of overall world income differences are due to factor accumulation differences, and 53% are due to total factor productivity differences. With development accounting, we were able to separate the contributions of productivity and factor accumulation in explaining income level differences. But present level but present levels are the result of past growth. Obviously your current growth is dependent. Forecasting भी हो तो you always talk about the previous growth. आपकी जो एक ट्रेंड चलता आ रहा है ग्रोथ का, उसकी में जो इंक्रीजिंग आप लोग उसका एक ट्रेंड निकालते हैं. सो यू आर गोइंग टू टॉक अबाउट दैट. सो व्हाट योर करंट or present scenario talk about, that is dependent upon the past growth. It is equally important to determine what part of a country's total growth is due to. तो इसको आप analyze करें whether it's productivity growth or it's by the factory accumulation. Let's just talk about some growth accounting. Here are the that where did it go? It is the growth rate of factor of production, that is per year हम percentage के according इसको measure करेंगे. And next is the growth rate of productivity. Again it's a comparative study with respect to your and we are going to talk about the differences in the growth rate of productivity among countries. So what does it say? It says the positive correlation suggests that both elements are important in explaining economic growth. Note that negative productivity growth for the two lowest income growth group. For highest growth countries, factor-based growth equals 1.83% per year on average. For lowest growth countries, factor-based growth equals 0.43% per year on average. The factor-based growth gap between lowest and highest growth countries is 1.4% per year. The productivity-based gap is much higher at 2.75. So all these things are explained in these two graphs, and uski further explanation is given in these two slides. You can just go through them again. And I inceptions suggest that both elements are important to explain economic growth, just as found with development accounting. Productivity growth is a more important source of differences in output growth rates. According to more sophisticated estimations, 68% of world's differences in per capita income growth are due to differences in productivity growth. और फैक्टर accumulation की वजह से कितनी है 32%. दैट मीन्स कि आपकी किसी भी कंट्री की अगर इनकम पर कैपिटा ग्रोथ को मेजर किया जाए तो उसमें जो मेजर रोल है दैट इज प्लेड बाय द प्रोडक्टिविटी, नॉट बाय द फैक्टर accumulation. Yes, factor accumulation does play a role but it's negligible. हम 68% को comparatively higher consider करेंगे with 32%. So this is it for today. Let's just talk about the case study, that is Singapore versus Hong Kong from 1960 to 1996. Both cities had high growth per capita income of 6 to 7%. And it's on page number 217. Yes, 217. So due to their similarities, obviously उनको अगर growth rate per capita देखा जाए तो that is same from year 1960 to 1996. So due to their similarity, one is tempted to conclude that those high growth rates have the same origins. Young 1995 estimated productivity growth through growth accounting, and for Hong Kong it was 2.3%, and for Singapore it was 0.2%. Singapore's growth would be based almost entirely on capital accumulation. Solely in physical capital, investment rate reached up to 40% of GDP at some point. It suggests that growth will slow down sharply due to diminishing returns to capital. So let's just conclude it. We have seen how productivity can differ between countries in both levels and growth. Up to what point those differences explain differences in income levels and total income growth. We have argued that productivity can only be measured as a residual, that is what is left after accounting for factor accumulation. Hence in the 50s it has been termed the measure of a ignorance. So we would like to explain why productivity differs. What determines technological progress? What affects production efficiency? What is most important in explaining productivity differences between countries? Thank you, class. It's over for today.